You might be familiar with that little message here. It says this web page is not available. What I'm looking for is Jedburgh Rugby Sevens, which was policed by G4S from Cumbria. I'm just in the middle of making the completion of my video on the Speculative Society in Edinburgh, which is a secret society that crashed the global economy in 2008. G4S is launched out of the secret society sectors, and Michael Ancram is a cover as the Marquess of Lothian for all of the crimes of the Rothschild family in Lothian Road and the Lothian 50 Ponzi schemes, like the sheriff, the rapist. Let me show you why I was adding to these images, and these images will be very incomplete because this is me attempting to post them on my website so that the whole story about the sleazy secret society run by Edinburgh University that is there to steal from the world can be covered up by the intel people that now work for Prime Minister Cameron of Lochiel with the white feather for cowardice. And I've got images of the Jedburgh heroes and all the places that will become scandalous because of the Jedburgh Law Court's treasonous actions in recent weeks. Yeah, in recent months, because they sold Scotland in the Swanee. Yeah, Salmon's complicit in it, and I'll show you the images just in case they never allow me to load them and they take me out for my insight. So this entire PowerPoint presentation is called Speculative Society, and I'm keeping the camera well away from the computer because we'll get that buzzing thing again. Okay, but I'm going to open it up to full screen. They will not let me transfer it to the telly, so you can see quite plainly that the Scottish citizens quite happily condone the theft from their country by the judiciaries and the corrupted policemen right at the top of the force. And there are a whole set of dilemmas. This video involves the asset stripping of UK energy, the involvement of people that used to be Labour politicians in the Conservative Party, and the price of the beer at the Tory club, and the directorates that interlock with the scandals that are the energy scams, that are the G4S scams, that are the closure of churches for lack of funds in inverted commas, and the total desertion of the working man in Scotland from the working man's cause. The focus there is on the Grangemouth place. Right then, let's open the video. I'll just save it once more just in case Bill Gates's friends crash me even further into silence. Okay, right, and this is going to be just an acoustic video, so until it warms up I'll let you see that I've found a revolutionary red jersey, and I'm pretending that I've got bulimia because it's way undersized for me, and that means that I'm going to have to drive myself into a lower food budget because all these bastards have taken everything that I earned in my lifetime from me. My house goes next, and that's in the hands of the corrupted Jedburgh Sheriff Court. Let me explain that. Let's make the images full screen so you can get the gist of it. I'm not allowed to give you the gory details because of the people that surveil my house as they see me writing it, and their family, Tom Weatherston, the defector to the Conservative Party, have been my monitors even before we left for New Zealand. And the man that monitored me in the golf club the day before my uncle had his stroke, because he's tied into this cabal too, the man with the stammer like the King's Speech was sitting on the bar stool, and when we came back he kept sitting on the bar stool everywhere I took my innocent family. That's you, the Weatherstons. I'm coming after you now. Your image goes online this afternoon once you take the blockage away on my website and the publication of the horrible facts about what you've done to Scottish society. All political parties, all political puppets, none of you are capable of making any change in the future of our country, as John Lamont, the thief and advisor to corrupted law enforcement, has reminded me of several times in public meetings when I accuse him of running Ponzi scams in government out of Lothian Road, run by the Rothschilds and covered up by all of the quislings all across Scotland. There are no ordinary working men now. They are timorous, timorous beasties, and the Rab Club is the best thing that they can do with their lives. It's typical and it is absolutely tragic. Let me show you the pictures. You may not understand the words. So image 1. Oh no, it's at the end of the story. That's the end of the story, with the big 6 energy companies and a picture of Gary Armstrong. You know, that when they used to sing on the rugby pitch about King Edward's army being suppressed by their courageous people. Gary Armstrong was a great rugby player. I watched him at Twickenham, and it's quite ironic that the people that were in the opposition and beat Jedburgh in the final had in their numbers a man called Chariots of Fire. Yeah, his name was a fire and his nickname was Chariots of Fire. Look at the previous videos I've made on the war crimes joke and appreciate how deeply Jedburgh is complicit in the suppression of the truth about why society is now incapable of funding itself, and why the Jedburgh Sevens are policed by a private company created by people who ran the arms to Iraq scandal, and they will not let me talk about it anywhere in the borders. The media are corrupted. That is the Southern Reporter and Miss Windrum and her ties to the Prince's Trust and the 70-year gagging order that Prince Charles has so he can steal from the people and get his routine pay rises, as all of the little timorous beasties all across Scotland sit in the corner and they watch the sport on the telly because it diverts them from the financial crimes of the Marquess of Lothian, who runs the Tory Club and is registered with John Major as a director at it. Right then, let's go to the beginning of the series of images. Oh, they won't let me move back through the presentation. Isn't it? Oh no, there we have an image of the Marquess of Lothian with Councillor Tom Weatherston, the ordinary working man who defected to the Conservative Party, like all of the drinkers at Jedburgh Rugby Club, because the beer's fucking cheaper there. That's Michael Ancram's master plan to keep the ordinary working man in poverty and to let all of those G4S vents that are run by Lord Condon and the corrupted judiciaries, they let them profit from it, and the local police are all losing their jobs and they're all losing their pensions, and they're looking kind of sheepish now about persecuting me and not allowing me to plead not guilty, which is the only legal advice I've been given, because the legal system is the fraudsters now. Yeah, right through the judiciary and right through everything I've investigated on the secret society in Edinburgh that is the Speculative Society. That video's uploading. You will be shocked. It is a global economic crisis because of the treasonous behaviours of Scotsmen and people in Dunedin on the take. All of them pay no taxes. All of them are advisors to law enforcement in inverted commas in Scotland. Some of them are in the House of Lords and their wives are very sick, and I understand entirely why their families are afflicted by illness now. You've heard my pathology theory. I will mention it as we go through. Okay? That's John Major at Centrica at the bottom. The Association of Conservative Clubs Limited, which Michael Ancram has been a director of, and John Major has also been a director of. John Major privatised the country's energy facilities, and he was a director for a long time at Centrica before it became a subsidiary of the Spaniards. Let's go through this in the reverse direction. So there's the Jedburgh Sheriff Court and the word scandal, which I'm going to embroil them in very soon, because many of these are war crimes and genocides globally, pan-continentally. Do you get the picture? Yeah? I'm a genuine revolutionary, but I'm not going to do it with weapons and by killing people. I'm just going to show you what our leadership teams have done to our country. They will not let me show you the pictures with high resolution because they're ashamed of everything treasonous that they have done to our country. Not just the politicians, the judiciary on the secret society that is the speculative society, are the big wigs. And that is a sick joke, because you have to call them the lords, and I know that the lords in the skies will catch up with them very soon. Right then, so there's Gary Armstrong with the man from the Leeds area who used to be one of my heroes, because he's a thug on the rugby pitch. I forget his name, but he's registered with the British Lion Thieves on the Yorkshire and the Leeds Rugby Union and Rugby League board of directors. I forget what his name was. The blindside flanker with a flash of white blonde hair. It may come back to me. And that's Gary Armstrong playing for Scotland when they were capable of winning things. If Gavin Hastings had not missed all the kicks in front of the posts before he sold off London Scottish to Bristol, because they were under threat of relegation, so they just crashed London Scottish. Right then, there's the Jedburgh Sheriff Court, right next door to the Jedburgh cop shop, who have tried to hand in cases, but they refused to acknowledge anything that I hand in, even although the Justice Secretary for Scotland tells me that I need to go back to the beginning of my accusatory cycle, when they deny that they know anything about the Trident scandal and they refuse to take any of it on. Okay, that's the Trident extinction threat run by the mercenary army leaders that has been acknowledged by Paul Wheelhouse and Michael Matheson. And there's the Jedburgh Sheriff Church that the Catholic Church can no longer afford to fund, or possibly the Kelso Church will be closed because I attend it and they want to silence me and to reduce my capacity to contact the innocents that are being robbed blind without the vaguest insight. Every denomination are victims of that. Christ never lived. And here you've got a picture of a tax exile who used to be a revolutionary. He's a fat bloke like Gary Armstrong now is. I saw him in the supermarket. He grinned sheepishly too. They're wee coorous timorous beastie. Armstrongs got their heads cut off in the Langham area because they were genuine revolutionaries. Yeah. And the Langham area is where Mary Queen of Scots got some of her boyfriends before they lopped her head off for sectarian reasons, and she stands in the Jedburgh jail even today, and she's a dead ringer for Rebecca Brooks, the serious fraud criminal and the propagandist for the Prime Minister for a couple of decades, only with investigations by Leveson where she gets remunerated for her crimes. Right then, let's keep going back. So there's the Association of Conservative Clubs Limited, you get the picture? Michael Ancram's on the board with John Major. They get the profits and they get the recruits from all of the other political affiliations because they keep the price of the beer down. We're not allowed to do that in government because it would be generous and kind to the taxpayers. Instead you have to rob them blind at every turn. Yeah? Any party, all parties. It is now a political mafia. We have 3 or 4 tiers of it in Britain, and none of them work for their people. All of them work for their slush funds. And the Law Society in Scotland have one. It's frequently deployed, and that comes in when we show you the rapist sheriff in the next couple of images. There's Michael Ancram, Marquess of Lothian. A great cover-up for the Lothian Road crimes. 50 Lothian Road is the epicentre of globalised fraud. Certainly in a British context, it's run by the Rothschilds, and that has only been revealed by me in the last fortnight. None of the other investigative reporters across our world, in any of the mainstream newspapers, or even in the amateur sector, which you see here, which is why I'm going to have to go on hunger strike to get this message out, because Miss Windrum will not do it for me, nor will my local political representatives, nor will any of the religious clerics, because they launch new saints to cover up the financial crimes of the Ogilvies and the McKillop's. Isn't that tragic that the world can be run like that way as a policy decision, and everything you read in the papers is a scam? Right then, so there's Tom Weatherston. He used to play rugby with me, and he started off as a Labour man, but he's explained to me conscientiously on the pavements before they gave me my gagging order at the Borders Council, because I understand entirely their toxic debt pool and how they are now persecuting the tenants in the council homes that they are unprepared to reveal the ownership of. That's the tenants in the council homes which have been asset stripped by the social landlords. I cannot get them to reply to my freedom of information request on who acquired as a hand-me-down, trickle-down issue all of the publicly owned care homes, the publicly owned rental homes. All of them have been sold into private interests, like all of the energy companies, which we'll get to soon. Okay? And we've already mentioned Majors selling them off with Thatcher's advice to begin with. He replaced her when she had to sign the gagging order on the scandalous issues around the weapons tradings, and that takes you into Brussels, which we were into in the earlier videos, because Brussels is now the epicentre for the Rothschilds. It's the epicentre for Europe, and it's right near the hole in the Maginot Line and very close to Waterloo, their greatest triumph in world history. That's when the banks began to tumble into their hands. The whole project is nearing completion now, and only my input has to be considered. There's nothing left to steal. We're in the 8th or 7th tier of the sovereign debt scandal, because every time they could make a decent decision, they opt for the warmongering and the funding of all sides to keep the numbers down, so that the Conservative club in Jedburgh, which is tiny, does not need to let in a lot of ordinary people, because they're in the war graves on the continent. And then we put the locals into the position to defend that and to sell the poppies to them. They're in the pictures a bit further up, which is why they're nervous about it. Okay, there's the 6 secrets of the sauna Sheriff Lothian. Are you beginning to see how it works? It is childish and buffoonish. This man gave his wife, and I might as well tell you, oh no, I will not tell you that, because his wife might genuinely have been persecuted. I've met someone who knows them, and she used to work for the Duke of Northumberland, who runs the poison gardens and the narcotics bit and the Harry Potter jokes without any investigation from law enforcement, because Lord Stevens of Kirkwelpington is a former Metropolitan Police and he's now stealing from the students at Northumbria University £50,000 for registering for the honours degree that he probably does not have, because you don't need to be very clever to be a criminal in these mafias. You just need to be ruthless. Right then, and there's a series of wigged characters that denounce the activities of Sauna Sheriff, but when he raped his wife in the gangbang incident, after drugging her up with the date rape drug Rohypnol, he was able to take half of the home from her when he was retired early for cover-up reasons. Edinburgh's secret men-only speculative society told to let women in. Yeah, so that's the speculative society that housed Andrew Lothian as a member, and Andrew Lothian invited many of them to rape his wife. Do you get the picture? Do you see that they try to be politically correct, but they ignore the crashing of the global banks in 2008, which is part of the art. You can divert people by paedophilia, or you can divert people by rape stories. Even in Coldstream there was a rape story, and it was a tragic story because the Leeds Freemason was loosed up above the Scottish border, and a policeman in Coldstream, who will not let me report anything to them, was able to save the daughter of one of my family members, which is relevant to some of the pictures in here, but I will not tell you which ones. Yeah, and that guy was arrested and jailed for the rest of his days, but he was not guilty of any financial crimes, nor was Jack the Ripper. That's the Macbeth story now. Yeah, and Prince Eddie, who was Jack the Ripper, was harboured in Glamis Castle for the rest of his illegitimate life. Yeah, and so there's Andrew Lothian and one of his girlfriends in a basque. It's petty, it's a cover-up for the crimes and the ownership of the world by the Rothschilds, and the Scottish vent for that is in Lothian Road and takes you into Dunedin and Otago University and Auckland, where the Rothschilds Trust is run. Those are the big issues that keep crashing my computer. There's the beautiful premises. So the society that is the speculative society is in Edinburgh University. Gordon Brown was the Chancellor there. You remember the bit of the story about me talking to the impoverished academics in the economics school at Otago? When I talked about Gordon Brown's crime, they told me again, fuck off. That is Hamish Wilson. You remember we had a Wilson who was a Prime Minister? I mentioned him in the first video this morning for the carpet bombing of the Garden of Eden. Yeah? And the next man who did that was also, or the first man to do that, was also from Coldstream. That's Alec Douglas Home, that runs a lot of the insurance scandals in this region still. And his family pretend that they have humanitarian interests in sub-Saharan Africa, which all of these teams keep brutalising again and again and again. Right then, Edinburgh's secret. So they want to let women in now. It would be really dangerous unless they start telling the truth about what their motives are for all these shallow cover-ups. Andrew Lothian is now a scamster in the IT sector. Still at liberty, there were no criminal charges levelled at him, like any of the Catholic bishops or even the popes that were accused of paedophilia, and I've accused the new one of genocide in Latin America. And the pictures of him giving communion to Tank Commander Vidal are uncontested. No one's prepared to sue me because they know that everything I tell is the truth. And there's one of the villains. I'm going to put pictures of all of them up as I find them out. So this is William Frayne Bell, long-term members of the Speculative Society, schooled at Loreto, one of the rugby playing schools where they're ever so posh, and they put their little finger out when they have a sip of gin, and they use the cigarette holders. It's quite close to Linlithgow, where they partitioned Pakistan from. Right then, let's keep going. There's another picture of him. Terra Firma Chambers, our advocates. He's a law enforcer. Isn't that funny? Which is why he's got that massive grin on his face. Yeah? Outstanding Chambers UK 2013. And you should see the cabal these people are in with Development Scotland. Here we go. This is a bit of a bigger story about Scottish abuses and law enforcement issues that are never touched by any of the criminal bosses in the law enforcement sector, because this is the energy bills and fraud all over Europe thing that I've made videos on, and I've referred you to the trading from Windmill Hill in Swindon and the private money lenders that are the Rothschilds. This is a picture of Professor Gallan, who was given his professorship at Edinburgh University that hosts the Speculative Society, and there's Alex Salmond given that big sign about the python and the willy and all the funds that come into the Bilderberger place that Harold Wilson used to be the chairman of as the country's leading socialist. Yeah, there is Professor Gallan talking up Scottish Power and renewables. He gets a 9 million salary to sell to Scottish people what was already in Scotland in 1963 when John F. Kennedy was killed because he tried to stop them in their tracks. That was the wildest winter in human memory in this region, and the thunderstorms that accompanied his killing were massive. I remember it was in my first year in the town of Kelso, just before we had the fire in our house, which I also understand. I think I understand also the tragic crashing of the fire engine as it crossed Kelso Bridge, where we once had a revolution because they kept tolling the people to cross the bridge years and years and years after it had been built by a man called Lees, part of the engineering firm. The Leeses are relatively decent. They fight for their country in Southeast Asia, and they do not understand how tragic that is, and they do not have the insight to contest it. Instead, they're conscripted and they risk their lives in Korea to fight the ordinary working man on another continent which we now entirely own. I'm very fond of that chap that risked his life for his country, even although he was fighting against ordinary working victims like him. And when my students came to Dunedin to try and study Agent Orange that was used in the brutalisation of Vietnam, and all the jokes of the Rolling Stones, and all the jokes of all of the people, including Nixon, that dismembered his own troops down there, and LBJ that allowed them to go and signed away his central bank, all of it is serious fraud and massive genocides for corporate ownership of all of those countries. And the citizens of Jedburgh do not have the wits to see that that is happening to them. It's the same with every town across our country. The number of folk that I've exposed in Kelso as being on the take at the public's expense is massive, and I've got all the PDFs, and when I get through with my divorce proceedings I will be coming up many of them, because I've got all the legal evidence that everything that used to belong to our community is now in private hands for personal gain in one generation. The whole transition from everybody being funded all the way to Professor and Prime Minister at the state's expense. Now everything has to be paid for by the impoverished kids or the tenants who get the repo man in when they go £200 into debt in the social houses that were sold to the unnamed social landlords, and every one of the housing associations is running a massive multi-million-dollar debt pool that is condoned by the big banks because it's the only way that they can make the money now. It's a Ponzi scheme. 7th or 8th international tier of it. Nobody gets a life because all of the central banks are owned by the bastards in these secret societies, which includes the G8 and the G20 and the NATO summit meetings. All of them are fraudulent field marshals, all of them are on the NM Rothschild's banks, and all of the interlocking things that we talked about yesterday through Monte Carlo and into Switzerland. Right, I've got a picture of Galan at the podium talking up his pay. Yeah, €9 million a year, same as the man at the Lloyds Banking Group who gets paid to sack all of the decent employees, and so everybody has to engage in perilously dangerous electronic transactions now. Yeah, and everybody behind the counter at the banks in Scotland were school chums of mine have told me that they took their pension in when they were aged 30 something because they knew what was happening to the funds. The same in the emergency services sectors. Right, there's the BP protesters, and that is the Grangemouth scandal, where they do not get a pay rise, but the people that are at the head of our society and are running the referendum for profit are prepared to convict me of crimes and bad behaviours. They will regret that very, very soon. Salmond wants to be a criminal in Westminster again. I've got his director numbers, I've got Trump's director numbers, and there is the Trump International Golf Club Scotland Limited scandal. Yeah, because it's on the same page as the Glens of Fowdland Wind Farm Community Trusts, and all of that has massive Ponzi shells in Scottish renewables, and all of the ministers know all about it, and none of it produces any energy at all, which is Prince Philip's plan and the reason that Gerard Schroeder shut down all of the nuclear plants all along the Baltic coast so they could launch the Gazprom scandal and the BP Rosneft scandal that is the Russian oil wealth that the Rothschilds already own, but they're now reselling it all across Europe because we're dim-witted enough just to sit and watch the sporting tournament and lap it up like that, like that. Just van der Westhuizen talks like that now because all of them have sins on their transcript. Right, and the Windmill Hill joke is a joke about another crashing of my computer because that's one of the Rothschild hubs, and when I investigated it they were ponziing their earnings out of that shelf, and it crashed my computer in a major way, and John Patterson and I made a video and we discussed that, and it was about the Windmill Hill company, and the Windmill Hill keeps coming into the cover-ups further up. There we go, Trump Scotland. There's Donald ranting at the screen with his arms waving around, and there's the Rothschild Windmill Hill company. It's got a lake on it, like the Devil's Advocate movie, where the Devil's Advocate walks around with the devil on the top of the building in New York. Isn't it funny that they're allowed to make the movies in Hollywood to cover up all of their crimes, and all of those things reveal the inner details of all of the cast in their war crimes and their genocides and their profiteering campaigns for most of world history since the Waterloo triumph near Belgium, where I was a consultant in pharma and I could earn £2,000 a day almost, or no, €2,000 a day for a day's consultancy. I'm trying to save lives what they do is they perpetually take them, and then they make a joke about it on Remembrance Sunday when they lay down the puppies. Okay, this is, we cover the business interests of only one Rothschild Lord. The Windmill Hill directors include a Rayburn. If we go back to the bottom, we'll see a picture of a Rayburn painting, yeah, and that has links to the ordinary working men that now drink at the Conservative Club because the prices are lower. Nobody drinks at the Jedburgh Rugby Club. Even the coffee in the Jedburgh Rugby Club is twice the cost of that at the corrupted Jedburgh Sheriff Court. The people that work there just do what they're told, and it's pathetic that what they're doing is they are limiting their own future, and their children have no future at all. But because of their need to keep their job and their paltry pay compared to what these guys tuck away in every haven across our globe, yeah, and that's going to include Orkney very soon. When Norman Lamont gets his way with the world, there's Trump's protest about the windmills offshore. Isn't it funny? Tier after tier of lying and stealing. There's the next one, which ties in Sheriff Kevin Drummond, the Silver Arrow thing, to David Steele, who created the Parliament building and inflated its budget after they had started tenfold. Yeah, they're involved in the Arrows scandal that takes you into the Brookhouse, Freshfields and Derringer scandal that is John Lamont's political and legal career. Yeah, he started off with Brodie's. He's been trained by the people in that massive company that is in the Big Five, the Magic Circle law firms that steal from the world. Yeah, and they sequester the world's lands, and that's called a land grab. Everyone's at it. The Trans-Pacific Trade Delegation that we talked about in that video that precipitated the earthquake in the English city of Christchurch, New Zealand, and it's right in top. The rubble from the Christian church was the most lethal scene in that whole event. Yeah, and the people that used to play rugby for Melrose and came back to make sure that I left New Zealand sold me the financial services things that I had the wits to invest in, and when I invested in them, no matter what happened to our bank accounts, because nobody earns any interests on their savings, I was able to make a decent throw of coming out of New Zealand, and we were still solvent because I understand the currency frauds. Yeah, and that banker, he played in the Melrose team, the chief of the bank that now has the Black Horse, that used to be the TSB Black Horse, that's in the story that I'm going to tell you when I go back to the characters that are in the Speculative Society listings. Okay, so there's Kev Drummond. He's affiliated in Selkirk to David Steele, who lives in a publicly built keep tower that was funded by the public. He runs NHS scams out of his garage. I've visited it when I'm earning my agricultural wage as a fishing tourist guide. Okay, I've been there. It's called Achewood. His children are building the rotary thing that is the energy scam on the River Tweed and could well compromise the future of the salmon stocks on the River Tweed, but they don't give a fuck about that. That's an English trend. David Steele is, you know, a typical English character. He steals from everything that Scotland could possess. Yeah, and he's on that Future of Syria fund with the Fleming bastards. They are the genocidal war criminals that make the Bond movies and run all of the intel scams through the whole war, with Bing Crosby doing the same role, and then he makes the comedies
beyond the war in the Hogan's Heroes movies. That's Butcher Haig. They do not have a picture now of him being affiliated as the rector at St Andrews University, where the Queen's children learn to steal and kill if the cause is right. Yeah, and here you've got the BBC studio in Selkirk that was created by this criminal, Ally Moffat, who's a millionaire at the BBC because he tells lies about Scottish genealogy, and he talks up the tourist industry, and he's got massive holdings in the directorate, but I've not had the time to reveal that yet because these are bigger crimes. He's one of the world's owners, but he's just an arselicker, yeah, and all he does is do the role at St Andrews University. He plagiarised his book on Borders history, according to a friend of mine who also fought in the South Pacific. The main cause of death in the Navy in the South Pacific was because the Navy aircraft carriers were not made by the same company as the aircraft, and every time they tried to land in peacetime, that was a fatal accident for all of the people that joined it as volunteers, because we were in peacetime then, and they wanted an adventure in the South Pacific, where the Christian missions committed genocide in the El Nino scandal. Okay, there's Ally Moffat, there's Butcher Haig, both rectors at St Andrews University, where the golf club is. Yeah, and that's Kev Drummond, the sheriff that has bailed out for reputational reasons. He gagged me on contacting Sheriff John Halley, who's a cover for the illegitimacy of the British monarchy, and he's been moved on really quickly. The Scottish Government have refused me a Freedom of Information request to ask how he gets paid and who pays him as a freelancer who's able to work for the prosecution service, for the defence of the client, or in the same case as the sheriff in the hearings or the trial or in front of the jury. That's the state of our country. There's Scottish Financial Enterprise. This is Sir Ewan Brown, who got his knighthood 2 weeks after Gordon Bowden and I revealed him as one of the men from Scotland who crashed the banks in 2008. Yeah, Ewan was appointed chairman of SFE on 1st August 2012, an executive director of Noble Drossart for 35 years. He was the Chancellor at Heriot Watt, where I got my education, and now a non-executive director of Noble Drossart Holdings. Previous Scottish Financial Sector Board appointments have included Chairman of Lloyd's TSB, no longer with us. The Black Horse from Belgium, Icon, also consumes all of the banking sector in New Zealand and Australasia, along with the only other rival, the ANZ Bank, which is part of the Anzac joke, killing of the war dead for the Russian oil wealth, by Winston Churchill, Britain's greatest man, and Mrs Thatcher is still Britain's greatest woman, until all of you wake up. Chairman of Lloyd's TSB, non-executive director of Scottish Widows Bank, chairman of Dunedin Income Growth Investment Trust, non-executive director of Amicable Smaller Enterprises Trust and Scottish Development Finance, member of the Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, also sometime financial advisor to Scottish Investment Trust, Scottish American Investment Trust, Scottish Equitable and Scottish Life, also a non-executive. It's on my website already. Look up Speculative Society. Ignore the paedophilia bit. I'm going to relocate it, yeah, because the paedophilia bit is just a cover for these massive and perpetual financial frauds. Right then, his colleagues in the Scottish Financial Enterprise are Stephanie Bruce, with previous at PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big four auditors, now the Mafia and the advisors to the Mafia. Ken Barclay. Have you heard that name before? Jamie Matheson, Matheson Dalgleish, Matheson the Justice Secretary for our country, who gives me confirmation of receipt of all of the crimes, but when I ask them what they're going to do about it, they say I need to go and report it to the police again for the third time. Then you've got at the bottom Kenneth Barker, the Chipping Norton set again. He's got previous at the bank Paribas, where Miss Lagarde came from before she became the thief at the IMF. It's a globalised fraud project, and it is really simple to interpret. Michael Poulsen, cannot find anything very sinister about him, but I have not even tried. I'm talking about the speculative society, judiciaries, financial services criminals, and people that persecute the innocents because they're in the wig and you have to call them my lad. That could be, oh, there we have the icon, the Speculative Society Edinburgh, the law-breaking global cabal, the University of Edinburgh. Let's continue now going down through, or shall I stop? So it's relatively short and it's quite easy to understand, I hope. So what I was trying to open was just something that would allow me to post those images on that big screen, but now I'm going to post them, and I'm going to post them one at a time, and I'm going to cut the little segment out and post it all on Facebook so all of you know why your pay has been frozen for all of that time. All of you know, even the neighbours of mine who admire John Wood for his trusting activities in Scotland, they're massive criminals. They've stolen everything from our country that they possibly can. They will not even give the employees at Grangemouth a token pay rise. Instead, they threaten them with closure as they openly embrace the Iberdrola boss, and John Major covers up his crimes by shagging somebody else in his cabinet. Can you remember that? The names of the diversions are relatively irrelevant, but you can see that they're prepared to sacrifice the Lothian rapist, and the women are the victims of all of that. The men are the victims of all of it. The working men that now watch the tournament or watch the golf tournament with their jaw hanging down like that as they give up their... At Jedburgh Sevens we were frisked on entry by the G4S personnel. All of the local schoolboys that could have done the selling of the tickets to the entirely peaceful audience, they were brought in at huge expense from all across the world, and we made a video the other night on the G4S Ponzi shells. Almost all of them are in a massive toxic debt pool, and it's society's capability that is paying for the bailing out of that, and all of it is designed to dismember the world's capacity to be free and prosperous. I'm going to stop. The sun's gone in because I'm getting really articulate. I hope you understand the story, and I'm only kidding, Gary Armstrong. I admire you still. I know that the Jedburgh people are spirited like the Kelso people, and all you need to do is look at your pension and your salary, and then you look at what these guys earn, and it only goes to the Ally Moffats of this world and anybody above him. They worship the Alpine movements, and the links to all of the religions and all of the frauds are incontestable. We've got all of the evidence. It is massive, and it is a crime against your children and your grandchildren. And the censorship bit is particularly evil. They've taken everything from me that I honestly earned, but they cannot take my reputation from me, and they are now very fearful about me having more time beyond the illegitimate divorce. Yeah, and everybody that's involved in my persecution needs to be very wary of all of the things that make me really, really God-fearing now. Yeah? I did not used to go to the church on a Sunday after all those years when I was an altar boy. But now that I've taken it on as a geopolitical project to understand how the world fails to work for any of its parishioners, worshippers, taxpayers, citizens, employees, public sector servants, all of you are being robbed blind by the criminal mafia that numbers only about 3,000 people, and all of NATO's armies that they have the command to kill all of the world's innocents with are in their hands, and it's your children that are in their uniforms. Unless you're a Jehovah's Witness, and you can opt out, and we discussed that yesterday as they passed by from Michael Moore's constituency. But because they think that God will do the work for them, they're bound to neutrality. Bye bye.